Hello and welcome to the first episode of Personable, a podcast focused on speaking to the world's best CEOs and entrepreneurs. Today we're honoured to be joined by Ruben Gnanalingam, who is the Group Managing Director of Westports, owner of QPR, LAFC and the KL Dragons. So thank you very much for joining me today, Ruben.
My pleasure to be on, and thanks for inviting me as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I just wanted to get started by asking you about your experience growing up in Malaysia.
Well, I was born there a long time ago, and I did most of my most of my schooling there from the age of 7 till about 17. I did high school mostly there in a school called Victoria Institution, which was really nice. I enjoyed it very much, and then I eventually got to London or got to the UK at 17 when I joined Eaton to do A levels.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. So what made you want to move to the UK? What made you want to go to Eaton?
I think in Malaysia, for many kids, if you have the opportunity to go, your parents have made up their mind from very young that you will go. Many kids come in at 13, actually. Many kids leave Malaysia at 13 to go to boarding school, but I think the cutoff really is 17 for A-levels. I think if you have the opportunity, most kids actually go at A-levels. And eventually, if you don't go at A-levels, then you might want to go at university. So typically, that's what it is. I think the education system in Malaysia is okay, but I think the education system in the UK is a lot better. And therefore, a lot of parents, if you can afford to send your kids there, they usually try to do that. So my parents, in fact, my brother and sister left earlier than I did. Because they did my going. But as I said, I liked my school, VI, Victoria Institution. I actually liked being there. It was actually quite fun, and I didn't want to leave. But I knew that when it come to A-levels, I had to go. So it wasn't a big shock or anything. But and I was open to it, and I actually enjoyed my time at Eaton as well. So it all worked out pretty well.
That's awesome. How have you found going to Eaton has helped since leaving? Have you found the connections useful?
Very much so. But I think it's like, I'm not saying any other school. Of course, it's a very special school, but I think the connection is there. At the time you make for life, and I've enjoyed, and I've kept in touch with most of my friends from Eaton. Of course, I only had 2 years with them, so I didn't make as many friends as I would have if I came, earlier. But still, I made close, friendships there when I was there, and as I said, they're lasting till now. You make friends in university and at high school as well. So I think now what's beneficial for me is I've got a big, diverse group of friends, and sometimes the difficulty is trying to cut down the guest list, because it gets complicated sometimes from that perspective.
So you then went to LSE studying economics. Did you find that was quite a big step up from school?
Well, I liked being in London, and I wanted to go to a London university or a city university. Basically, I didn't really want to go to a campus, and I quite enjoyed that part of my life as well. The 3 years in London were great. Again, made lots of friends, and I think the education level they provide at the LSE is amazing as well. And the people you meet, the people you have to challenge there, also very, very high caliber. And I think, it's put me in a good position going forward after that. So I think, it's a great school. And I'm still in touch with them till today, doing all kinds of stuff with them. And when it comes to social science or economics, I think there's very few other schools that match what the LSE is trying to do. There are better universities around the world doing many other things, but when it comes to social sciences, I think this is one of the best in the world.
That's awesome. So after university, you went into Westports. What made you want to go into your father's company? Why not go into another company initially?
I think when you're born into a family of my background, it's almost expected that you will join the family business at some point, right? So in fact, what I did after LSE was I called my dad and I asked him if I could postpone the beginning of the rest of my life, and I did a kind of half a year off to just go and travel for a little while before I went back home, and then I knew I was going to join the company the day I graduated, so that's why I postponed it for like 6 months. So eventually, when that was done, I went back and I joined him as you would, right? So I did that for about a year. which was great. I enjoyed learning everything. I think what was nice about that stint was in that 1 year I got to do many jobs in the company. From being
Yeah.
a clerk on the wharf to working the night shift. Trying to understand all the parts of the planning business of the business, trying to understand the commercial side, the financial side, everything. So, and my dad put me right at the ground level to make sure that I understood every part of the business. Right. So I think, from that perspective, it gave me a good grounding as to where everything was and where everything is. And it's helped me, run the company today. It was actually the best part of that early stint was a lot of the people who report to me today were my bosses at the time. And I think what I
Wow.
like about that is that because they were my boss at some point, they don't feel scared to tell me off now while they're
Yeah.
reporting to me. And I think the last thing you want to have in any company is a whole bunch of yes men who just tell you what you want to hear. Because, one of the key things about any business is feedback. And you want good, clean, honest feedback all the time. And the thing is, when you have those sometimes, relationships where you're afraid of your boss or you're afraid of telling him something that you should, this is where, things can break down. And I think things in the company can go really, really wrong. And I think that's one of the key strengths that we have today is that most of the people that report to me today, and it just shows the level of loyalty in the company as well, that they're all still around 20 years later. They all used to be, I used to report to them. And therefore, if I'm wrong, they have no problem at all telling me, when you're wrong, you have to change this, and this is just the way we feel. Now, sometimes I'm right, sometimes they're right. And the thing is, no one can be right all the time. And I think that's why that part is actually really, really crucial. And I think that 1 year, 1.5 years I did then was great because of, I think that part was the best part of that 1.5 years. Of course, learning everything was great, but um, uh, that part made it even sweeter.
So what made you, if it was like you're doing so well, you seem to be learning a lot about the company, what made you want to leave the business to create an incubator?
So I think there was two parts to that. One is the opportunity that was there at the time because it was around that .com era that this was happening. When everything was going online and everything was becoming a website and everything was trying to be done by the internet. Right?
Sure.
So that was one side of it. The other side of it was my dad and I felt that it may be better for me to make my mistakes somewhere else. Right. So, and you're going to make mistakes. No matter what you do, you're going to make mistakes.
Yeah.
So the question is, where do you want to learn those mistakes? And maybe it's best done at a place where you can afford to make the mistakes as opposed to one where it might cost you a little bit more to make the mistakes. So,
Sure.
so what happened was we set up this incubator fund. I did it with a bunch of friends of mine. And we started investing and incubating a whole bunch of companies for about 4 years. So that's how that went.
Wow. That's awesome. So what would you look for in a founder or a company? What would make them worth the investment to you?
So I think the part that we found out was that, and this is after meeting like hundreds of companies, right?
Yeah.
Is that the people count the most, right? So you have to back the person.
Sure.
And in Malaysia at that time, there was very little deal flow, right? So we had to meet so many people just to get one decent idea. And and I think that was a big problem that the deal flow was so bad that you couldn't find very many great ideas. Number one, and then besides finding the great ideas, which I think is the easier part, is finding the people that can actually execute it. Finding the good people that can actually run the business. And I think you've seen this before, and many people have said it before. You have to invest in the people, not the idea, right? So many people come with a great idea, and the wrong people, you're not going to make money. You're going to lose money for sure. In fact, because some people have great ideas. It's just that they can't let go and they want to be the boss, and they don't realize that sometimes their role isn't to be the boss, right? So, and their role is actually to come up with great ideas. Some people get stuck to ideas which they think are very, very good, but nobody else really does. And I think these are the ones that these are the easy ones to be fair to rule out. So one of the like simple metrics I always use were in those days were, who would you give your receipt to, right? Because for me, if you're giving your receipt to someone, means he's paid you, or he or she has paid you at that point in time. And if you don't know who your customer is and who's paying you, I think it's very hard. It's very hard to understand how this business is going to make money. Now, I know that many people rely on businesses now that depend on, they have no income whatsoever, but become big because they have huge amounts of followers, etc. That kind of thing. But we never went into that kind of industries because unless you actually start making money at some point, it all starts to fall down eventually. So, so even like the Facebooks or the Googles of the world maybe didn't have so much money in the beginning, but eventually they had a model which would earn them revenue. And I think right now, even at their gigantic valuations, they're earning really good money for those valuations. So I think having that clear path to revenue and knowing who you be giving your receipts to, I think is very, very crucial. And I think that's what people tend to forget.
So how would you be able to scope out the difference between a good and a bad founder just off meeting them?
Well, sometimes it's easy to find the bad ones, right? So they can give you a bad impression in the first time, so that's easy. That's not a problem at all. Yeah. Finding the good ones is usually harder, and unfortunately, after doing it so many times, you go in with a whole bunch of skepticism straight away. So, and you have that whole list of questions you ask to make sure you know how to weed out the genuine ones, right? So you tend to have maybe after meeting 100 people, you meet 50 which you say, no way, right? From the start, there's absolutely no way. And the other 50 you say maybe, but then, and then you have to sift them, you have to filter them out and ask the right questions. And strangely, it's very similar to like hiring a new coach as well. Just like any other pitch, everybody lies. Right? So the question is, can you filter to the lies and understand which parts they actually mean and which parts you're actually genuine about. So from that perspective, I think it comes with experience, mostly, and that's why I said, we only got better after doing 100 or a few hundred meetings and meeting all these people and understanding who are good and who are bad. And you have to imagine that we were very young as a team as well. So who were we to evaluate people at the time? But once we had a few hundred under our belt who we met, I think it made it a lot easier. And we had some ideas of our own and wanted to incubate some of our own ideas, and I think those are the ones that eventually succeeded the most for that fund after I left. So as I said, the key thing is finding the right questions to figure out if they're being genuine. And I think for me, even now, I think good people is the way to go, right?
Yeah.
Of course, you can't just invest in good people, but if they're not good people, for me, as a rule, I just say I wouldn't invest in them. Full stop. Right? So, don't get me wrong. There are probably some less good people who you can make a lot of money off, and I think there are many entrepreneurs out there who are maybe not the best people in the world, but you can make a lot of money off them. But I think from our perspective, we just rather not.
Yeah, you mentioned you wanted to make your mistakes at the incubator. What were some of the big mistakes that you made at the incubator and the key learnings from that?
So the one I always quote is as soon as we started it, one of our investee companies, which was very much a software house, decided that flexi hours were great, right? And you have to remember that me and my friends mostly just finished university 1 or 2 years before that.
Yeah.
The flexi hours was university was all flexi hours, right? So there's no like 9 to 5. So we were used to flexi hours, and we thought, flexi hours is great. This makes a lot of sense. And the idea was, as long as you get your 8 to 10 hours in per day, then what does it matter what time you start or what time you end? So we decided to and I remember going back to my dad and saying, we're going to implement flexi hours, which is a great new idea, in one of the companies. And he was like, go ahead, please let me know how it goes. And then it lasted for about a month and a half. Because although the productivity on the work side was still going well, the issue we had was nobody was there to pick up the phone at 9 a.m. when customers were actually calling, right? And then you get to realize that the reason why you don't do flexi hours is because nobody else does flexi hours. And if you want to have customers in the long run, then you must need to suit them. For that business, our customers didn't adjust well to flexi hours, and therefore, if you have to adjust to your customer, they were 9 to 5, and therefore we needed to be 9 to 5. So after a month and a half, I went back to my dad, came to my legs, said, it didn't work. He was like, I knew it wasn't going to work. Then I said, why didn't you tell me? It's like, if I told you it wasn't going to work, you just tell me that I'm old school and I don't know anything. And once you learn it yourself, you're never going to forget it ever again, and you're never going to try it ever again. If I just told you that you can't do it, then you'll always be itching to try it. So I'm glad you tried it, and I'm glad you learned from it. So that's one of the key learnings in that period.
That would have been interesting if you implemented that at Westports, if a bit down the line.
It will never work because we have very strict hours over there where we work on shifts. So So I mean, I think those hours probably could work well for places where, again, your customer is also working on flexi hours. I mean, there are not many places where that happens, or you might want to split your organization into parts where some people get to work flexi hours and some don't. And as long as your culture doesn't make one group, feel more rewarded or more appreciated than the other, then I think it could work. But you can't easily.
So when did you decide that it was the right time to go back to Westports? What made that click? Go, I'm ready now.
Actually, it was again a whole bunch of things. One was you could see that Westport was expanding, and my mom had told me that your dad wouldn't mind some help. I think, right? So, but my dad was never the kind of guy who wanted to admit that I don't think he's ever the kind of guy who wants to ever be his help. So, so it took me a while to convince him that I needed to come back, although he wanted me back as well. I think eventually we spoke about it, but I kept going to him and said, I heard you need some help. I don't mind coming back. He was like, no, go do your own thing. I'm good. And then my mom's like, you can't ask him, right? You got to just tell him. So eventually one day I went in and said, look, I'm coming back. What should I do? He was like, oh, cool. This is the plan. You have to do this. And to be fair, he had a very clear plan of how we do things. And I think what he said to me was, there are 3 constituencies you need to satisfy over the next few years, and then I'll make you the boss, right? So I'll let you run the company after that. So number 1, you have to make sure the shareholders and the board trust you. That's number 1. Number 2, you must make sure the customers love you, right? And number 3, you have to make sure that your colleagues respect you. Right? So you need to work on these 3 things. And they said over the next 5 years, I'll hand over department by department to you. And you take over those departments, you run it this way, and you make sure that those 3 things happen for those departments. And I think once that is done, and true to his word, exactly about 5 years later, I became CEO in 2009. So, and I've obviously stayed ever since, until now. So, but
how did you? What did you have to do to get them to respect you?
I think.
How did you go about that?
I think one of the key things about getting anyone to respect you is to make sure, when it comes to from a work environment, is understand where they're coming from. I think that's very crucial. But also making sure that you know the stuff as well. You can't go in there and try to, lord over someone when you don't know what he's actually speaking about, and then telling him that he needs to make it better. So I think the crucial part there is, everybody wants to have an organization which is efficient and running well. Right, but I think you have to get your hands dirty and understand what it takes to get that going, and you have to spend time with them, a lot of time in detail, to make sure that that they can actually get better. And the truth about it is, and I've done experiments from this before, is that it may sound strange, but everybody actually wants to work, right? Everyone doesn't mind taking a break for 6 months, doing absolutely nothing, but after 6 months, I mean, unless you're a complete drug addict, I think you want to come back to real life, and you want to actually get it back into doing something with your life. So actually everybody wants to work. And I think what you have to make sure is that you create an environment where everybody can thrive and succeed. and if you can, then people get more excited to be where they are, and they want to follow your leadership, and they want to work with you and for you. And for me, leadership for me is a very, very simple rule. You're only a leader if you are still making people around you better. If you're not making people around you better, then you're not the leader, and you have to accept that you might need to be the follower, right? So,
yeah.
And at some point in your life, you have to realize that, whether it's energy or anything else, people tend to slow down as well, and I've seen many people before who are older than me, understand that. Look, okay, I accept that he's the leader now because he actually has more energy to do it and focus a lot more, and they accept it. But of course, sometimes egos get in the way. But in general, I will have to accept that at some point that somebody else will be better leader than me. In fact, because we're shareholders in the company, for me, I've always said to anyone that I'm happy to step aside at any point in time if there's somebody better to run the company than I am. Because I value my shares a lot more than I value my job, right? So, and if there's a better leader out there, then by all means, let him do it. Because, my share, the value of my shares will go up, even better. And that doesn't mean I don't participate. I can still participate and help that leader. Right? I just don't have to lead all the time. And the thing is, as I said, if you're making people around you better, then you're the guy. Then you are the leader. If you're not, then accept that you're a follower. And that doesn't mean you don't participate, but it just means that you have a different role. And
so you during your time at Westports, you've led a very successful IPO. What was that process like? And what would you have done differently if you were to do it now in 2022? Or maybe pre-COVID, we can say.
I think, we ran that process for the IPO in 2013 very well. I had a lot of help, to be fair. We had good shareholders who had experience with it. We had 3 shareholders at the time, my family and 2 others, both institutionals. And they both had experience from it. So the board helped a lot because of the experience they had doing an IPO. And then what happened was we had a lot of banks as well. We had about 6 banks helping us do it as well. So, and the guidance from the banks and the board really made a lot of help. Made a lot of difference for us. I mean, I had to lead it, and it was a very tiring experience, but very, very rewarding at the same time. And I can't think of anything I would really do differently today, apart from the fact that I probably wouldn't have had to travel so much because of Zoom. Most investors today would be happy to see you via Zoom. But the traveling for the roadshow to inform investors, etc., was very, very tiring. But it was very, very worthwhile in the end as well. So, and I think the part I enjoyed the most from that initial roadshow was, you think of your company in one way, and then you meet a whole bunch of investors who think of it in a different way. And you know what? Sometimes, as I said, sometimes they're right, sometimes you're right, and what their feedback has allowed us to do is make the company better, right? They start measuring us from metrics we didn't measure ourselves before, and then once we start measuring from those metrics, we're like, hey, actually we can improve even more by doing this, right? So we were very open to the feedback from everybody, and we're still open to today. Lots of changes are still happening from the investor world where they want you to be more sustainable these days, and we're learning from them what parts of sustainability are important to them, and we're trying to evolve as fast as we can. I think to date, we have one of the best ESG or sustainability ratings in Malaysia at the moment. I think of all ports globally, which are listed as well, I think we're highest from that perspective as well. But even then, I still think it's we're just scratching the surface right now, and there's still a lot of areas we can improve on and become better from that. And I think that's what that roadshow allowed us to do, and that's what being interactive with investors over the last 10 years has allowed us to do by being a listed company. So as I said at the beginning, I think feedback is very crucial, and genuine feedback is very crucial. And I think not just from my colleagues, but also from the investor base, that their feedback's allowed us to become a better company as well.
Yeah. So also, your business manages, am I right in saying, over 5,000 people? Just like with the companies that you invested in your incubator, how do you go about finding good people, and then also how do you manage so many people successfully?
Well, the first thing you have to know is it's about 6,000 now. And first thing you have to know is you can't manage 6,000 people, right? No, that's
Yeah.
not possible. I try to remember as many names as I can, but you can't obviously manage all of them. My dad is amazing at remembering names. He remembers all their names, I think. So, but what you have to do is you have to manage people and make sure that they know how to manage people, right? So, as I
Yeah.
said, you have to make sure the other leaders around you are also developing and they're also leading, right? And I think you have to make sure that you do checks along the lines, down the line, to see that managers a few rungs below you are also managing the people below them. And the way you see that is basically by trying to figure out who stays and who doesn't stay, right? So, and who's thriving and who's not thriving. So you have to have performance management systems in place to understand, especially for a large organization, to understand whether things are moving well in all levels of the company. And then that actually gives you a barometer, not just of those people who are performing, but also the people managing them, right? And to a certain extent, everybody is a leader from a certain extent. You're either going to lead a small group or maybe a bigger group, or you're going to be a leader one day. And I think that's what we position everybody to understand as well, that leadership is not just important for the people on the top, it's also important for the people at the bottom. So we expect all of them to be leaders one day. We try to promote from within a lot, actually. So we try not to hire from the outside so much because it's a very unique industry. People from the outside usually don't understand the dynamics of it. And what we've always found is that if we hire people if we promote from the inside, um, they also come with the right culture because they're not they understand the culture because they've been there for a while, right? So, but that doesn't mean that we don't hire at all from the outside. Sometimes you have to hire senior positions from the outside because you need the expertise. But if the expertise are not crucial, then we'd rather promote from within.
So, how has your relationship with your family and with your dad, especially, changed since getting involved with Westports and becoming one of the leading figures in the company?
I think with my dad, I've always had a very professional relationship with him anyway. Right. So our relationship hasn't really changed all that much. Him and I are two people who can have a very strong argument um, um, now and have dinner an hour later, and it'll be totally fine. All right, and we don't hold grudges because I think I know and he knows that our arguments that we're having are just different opinions of how to run the company better, right? And I think we
Sure.
both appreciate that our different points of view make the company better as well, right? And sometimes his argument wins, sometimes my argument wins. But what we always agree upon is whichever argument that we decide is the one we go with, we both go with it and we both stick with it, whatever one we chose. And I think that's the part that's important. Sometimes my colleagues find it strange that we're having this heated argument in 1 minute and then having lunch the next minute, completely forgotten about it. So, but I think that's been the part that I think has made it easier at the workplace, which is, we're just very professional people anyway, and I think that's why it's been easy from that perspective. But we went to a families in business course in Harvard for a week, and that made the transition a lot easier as well. Um, they made us understand that you have different roles to play, and you have to understand which bucket you're falling in. Right? You could be a shareholder, you could be a director, you could be an employee, but you're always going to be a family member, right? And you have to understand that
Yeah.
those three. Sometimes the Venn diagram meets where you're all at the same time. But sometimes you're not an employee, and sometimes you're not a director, and sometimes you're not a shareholder, and you have to understand what your role is in each one, and every single role is different. Every one you wear a different hat, and you have to know which hat you're wearing. And first and foremost, at least for my family, is that family member comes first, and then the rest comes later.
Yeah. How would you differentiate your and your dad's styles and leadership and ways of leadership in the company? And how has it changed since you've become a leading figure in the company from how it was before with him leading it?
So I think that actually that one's pretty easy because he ran a lot of things with his gut, and I think he could, and because he had a lot more experience, and I couldn't obviously when I came in because I had lot less experience. Now I run a lot of things with data, and the thing is I can because there is a lot more data today, which there wasn't before,
Yeah.
and he didn't have that data before. So I think that was the big difference when I joined in 2004, which is 18 years ago, and I tried to push a more data driven approach, and of course he had the more gut version approach, and a lot of our arguments sometimes is when the data doesn't suit the gut, right? So and that's when we have to have a debate, and and eventually we try to reach a common ground. But the how it's evolved over the last 18 years is that I think he's getting more into the data, and obviously with experience, I'm getting more of the gut. So I think that's how it's blending in pretty well. So but it was very different when I first joined. I was very much data driven. He was experience driven.
Perfect. So we're going to take a slight different turn now and asking quite a general question, but why sports? Like, why get into sports? What made you want to get into sports in the first place? You've had a lot of involvement for a long period of time.
I've always liked sports. I've always liked sports management. Not just actually, I think I enjoy sports management more than I enjoy playing sports. To be really fair, even in high school, I wasn't the manager of the baseball team. I wasn't the player in the baseball team. I was actually the manager of the baseball team at school. And throughout many parts of my education, my favorite thing was championship manager, which I'm not sure it still exists today, but it definitely existed 20 years ago, and that was it was like FIFA of those days, right? So it was a great game, and it was all about management. You weren't using a joystick or a console or anything like that to play those games. It was just trying to put in the right blend of people to make sure that your team tries to win. So it was actually like not like managing, right? Um, so that's why I grew to love the idea of managing sports teams, and therefore, looked for opportunities when they came along.
Yeah. So we spoke about this briefly before, but how did you first get involved in a football team?
So the first one was when a bunch of my friends decided to start a TV show um, to try and prove that there are other ways to find talent in football, and that was based in Malaysia. The show was called My Team, and what we did was we went around the country trying to look for talent, and then in very much typical reality TV style, you have this selection process which whittles down like 500 people to 24 people, and then those 24 then have to play a match, and that match happened to be against the Malaysian national team, and actually the whole thing went pretty well because I think we were leading 1-0 till about the last few minutes, and then we lost one at the end. And I think it was a great testament for us that we managed to find talent off the street, literally off the street. Some of them were like toll booth operators or truck drivers and things like that. And we managed to find this team which could challenge the national squad, which has been obviously these guys have been in academies and playing for club teams, and we actually managed to challenge them, which was great. And so we started by just sponsoring this program. I mean, I wasn't running this TV show. My friends were running a TV show. We were just sponsors, and eventually after the show ended, we decided that as a group, why don't we start a team with these guys, because they could challenge the national team, so they must be pretty good. So we got all of them together into one football club, and we joined the Malaysian League with that club, and we participated for about 4 years. But unfortunately, after that, we had to give it up because it was just too complicated. There was just way too much politics at the time in Malaysian football, which didn't allow we didn't allow a level playing field for clubs like that, and we just felt that it was just the wrong setting, and we just didn't feel it was right. So that's why we did that in the last about 4 years. But I did that with Tony, and I remember when we closed that club, we said one day we'll get back into football, and get involved in another club, and so eventually we did as well. So
Yeah, so how come you decided to go into basketball before getting into football again?
So again, that was by chance because we were trying to set up a regional football league, right? For
Right.
Southeast Asia. We felt that that would probably have more traction than the individual national leagues that are there today. Um, and so we wanted, a league where on a regular basis, Singapore will play Kuala Lumpur, and Kuala Lumpur will play against Bangkok, and Bangkok will play against Manila, and Jakarta, and Bali, and whatever. So we wanted to have a
Right.
regional league. So we went around speaking to many people to see whether we could do this regional league, but we didn't get much traction from any one of them because they never wanted to let go of their jurisdiction. Right. But in that process, we actually bumped into someone who's running Southeast Asian basketball. And we actually said, I can't give you football, but I have basketball. If you want, you can start up a regional basketball league, and why don't
Wow.
and I'll give you the license perpetually to run this league. So obviously we wanted to see where it went, and we I do like basketball, to be fair. I never got involved before, but
Yeah.
after watching a few games, I realized that from an entertainment perspective, it's actually a lot more entertaining, to be really fair. Every basket goes in, you cheer as much as the goal goes in. Right? So
Yeah.
so there's a lot more cheers and a lot more ups and downs in that game, and the excitement level is great. And when you have two teams which are equal in caliber, you have a great game. But even when you have one team which is a lot better than the other, you have showboating, which is also very entertaining. So that's when your slam dunks and all start coming out. So it's a great thing to watch no matter what. So we thought, since it's got such great entertainment value, we said, why not? Let's try it out. So we started this league along with a few other friends from Indonesia and Singapore, and eventually Thailand and Vietnam as well. And so that's how we got that league started. And because we got that league started, well, I mean, somebody needs to take the helm of the Malaysian team. So I offered to put my hand up and said, okay, I'll do the Malaysian one. And that's how we got involved in the KL Dragons.
So with this league being brand new, I'd be interested in how do you go about building a brand like that and also developing a following with something that's so new? Because a lot of football clubs, things like the Premier League, have been around for so long, way before people's lifetimes, whereas something like this basketball league, pretty new, new fans, new everything. How do you go about building a brand of that sort?
Like any other startup, I guess you have to just so I think there's marketing at two levels. One of the league itself, the ABL. So we put some money into the ABL to make sure that ABL itself could market itself, and of course, the team would then need to brand itself in its own home country as well. So we did a lot with regards to so it's like a startup within a startup as well. So we did a lot
Right.
to try and promote ourselves in the Malaysian context. We were trying to attract fans, not just the regular basketball fans. We're trying to attract fans from other sports as well. We're trying to attract different crowds because Malaysian football, somehow they always play at night. And we decided that at night the kids can't come. From a cultural perspective, the parents won't let them come at night. So kids can come in the day games. So we positioned our games to be around 5 p.m. as opposed to 8 p.m. Right. So, and then the other part
Right.
is it's indoor. In Malaysia, that's a big deal because as much as you like the sun here in the UK, we have too much of it in Malaysia, and it actually gets very, very hot out there, and therefore, if you're watching something outdoor, it's usually quite humid and quite muggy. So, and therefore, we position that as another selling point to get families involved, women involved, because women didn't want to watch football so much because it's just too hot and it's not comfortable. So that's how we try to build that fan base to try to get people to come and watch from that perspective. We also had a lot of help from the NBA, surprisingly. They were very supportive of us trying to grow basketball in the region and compete with other sports. And I think when we started the league, at least in Malaysia, I think basketball was the 16th most popular sport at the time. It's now, I think, the sixth in Malaysia.
Wow.
But we had to start like any other startup. So it's similar to when the MLS started whenever the MLS started, I think in the 90s. It's very similar. I think they had to start from scratch as well. And you just build and
Yeah.
build, build.
So how was the transition to then buying QPR again? How did that come about?
So after giving up my team, especially Tony, to be fair, decided that he was gonna look for another club, and I said sure. And whenever you got one, let me know. So we looked at a few clubs, and we never found anything that was suitable for us until QPR came along. And of course, when that did come along, the deal seemed like the right kind of deal. We didn't feel like we were just a stalking horse to somebody else. And I think most importantly, when we went to Loftus Road for the first time, we got a very good impression from the fans about the club. I mean, we met the current manager at the time, we met a few players, we met the owners, we met a lot of people, but a bunch of fans outside the stadium were the ones who convinced us because, they gave us, QPR is always known as a family club, and, that's good. But those fans outside gave us the confidence that this is really a family club. And I think that was what was crucial for us because I think that's what we wanted to get involved in. And that's why when we met those fans outside, after the first game we watched at Loftus Road, that's when we said, we're definitely going to do this. And I guess it's just the opportunity that came along. So that's why we did keep it.
Yeah, you previously talked about the kind of environment at QPR being somewhat toxic when you first arrived. How did you go about eliminating that toxicity, and how would other CEOs or founders go about doing the same in their own institutions or environments?
So I think the key issue there is governance. I think the reason why it was toxic was because there was no governance. So when we took over, there was no board. There were no board meetings, and everything was run on the fly, really. There was no structure, there was no clear structure, and the people we had in charge for those first few years were not, people who believed in governance or did things they're not bad people. They just didn't have any governance in them. And when you don't have that, that's when you allow the toxicity to come in, right? So, and there are many characters in football who are trying to, they're trying to make money, and they're going to make money of some people. And I think when you don't have a good structure in place, it's much easier to be the mark who they target to make money off. And I think so. That's why we allowed people who wanted to make money off us to come in very easily, and therefore needed to spend some time to clean all that up. So I think the way you clean it up is first you look at your own people, and then decide who's good to keep and who's not good to keep, right? So and then so we made a change of leadership, which allowed for us to then look towards the future. We added in some new roles, which again focused on trying to make the club culturally focused on a clear direction as well. So, but I think a lot of it, as I said, is governance. Putting in the right structure and the right people is what allows us to do that. So, and a lot of it comes along the lines of having good people, right? So I think I mentioned this to you before. We might lose out on a great talent because we decide that he's not good people, right? And I'm happy to lose out on a great talent who's not good people because we're not the kind of club who can afford to have bad apples who may be really, really talented, right? So, many other clubs could probably afford that. We can't afford that as a club, and we need to make sure that the apple cart is peaceful and happy. And I think so that part for us is very, very crucial, and therefore bringing in good people for us has always been very important. And I think that's the main change that we focused on when we decided that culture was important in the club. The strange thing, as I mentioned to many people before, is that if you look in Malaysia, two companies in Malaysia, at least the two public listed companies in Malaysia, who focus a lot on culture are actually Westports and AirAsia. And yet it took both myself and Tony 4 years to realize that culture is also in the football club. And that's what we didn't do in the first 4 years. We both raise our hands up every single time and say we completely forgot about culture. And then when we looked at the culture, we were like, my God, this is bad. This is really, really bad. And that's when we knew the first thing you have to do is when you have a bad culture, you have to remove people. You have to change that by changing the personnel at the beginning, and then bringing in people who can actually change the culture and drive down the culture that you want. So I guess that's the real way to do it. You have to make some drastic changes too. Otherwise, it just won't work. So that's what we did, and in the last I guess 6 or 7 years, I think the culture's been getting a lot better. And I think today, where it is today, I mean, I will never say it's perfect because I think there's always room to improve, even with culture. But I think it's a lot closer to where we want it to be, and I think we're quite happy as to where the culture's been going, and I think where it's going to go to as well.
So what sparked that moment of realization for you? When were you like, yeah, this is toxic, something needs to change, people are taking advantage of us? What sparked that moment?
I think, it was not just one moment. I think it was a series of moments. I think the FFP fine was one of them, and then, trying to get an understanding of, what went wrong there and how that came about. And then at the same time, of course, the bills were getting higher and higher. Financially it was getting a lot, more difficult. And then when you analyze all of that, you realize that, we were played many times. Right? So we were played by people who, to be fair, I think, as much as we would like to really fight over them, if you're open to be played, it's 100% legal what they did in that sense, right? So, they oversell you someone who's actually a dud, but you buy, right? So it's willing buyer, willing seller, right? So, but then when you analyze what happened, the whole process, then you realize that not everyone was acting in your interest from their side, and not everyone is acting in your interest from inside as well. And that's when you have to analyze, what went wrong inside. Why don't we have people protecting us from the inside? And when you analyze that, you realize that the governance isn't there. The people to protect you are just not there. And what do you do? So, so that's why, putting in the right governance, putting in the right structure, putting in the right people, that's very, very crucial in running a great club.
Yeah. You've also talked about wanting to make QPR more sustainable, often pointing towards creating a new stadium. Is there a new stadium coming in the works? And also, what are your other plans to make QPR more sustainable and hopefully get promoted back up to the Premier League?
I think, like many other clubs in the UK, for us, sustainability comes in either two parts. I mean, you can either have a lot of income and therefore be sustainable that way from gate receipts and selling more jerseys or having more sponsors. And then, of course, one of the other ways is by selling players as well. There is this transfer market in Europe which actually works. So I think it's two-pronged from our side. One is to grow the natural income base, which is ticket sales and all that. And I think our fans have been fantastic in terms of trying to grow that. But I think we also now need to look at how we grow our non-fan income. For example, concerts done at the stadium, or other kind of events done at the stadium, or other kind of ways to earn money from non-game days. I think that's very, very crucial.
Sure.
And I think that's why we want to see what we can do with the venue, how we can improve it, to make sure that is also we can also derive an income from it on non-game days. And I think that's one of the key ways for us to look at sustainability long term. And we're speaking to the council about how we can make changes here, and the council actually been very supportive and very open. We just need to come back with some clearer direction as to which way we want to go in. And then at the moment, we're investigating all kinds of angles as to how we get more income from non-game day revenue. I mean, we have a 5-acre site in pretty much central London, which is used 26 times a year. That's just ridiculous, right? So, it's just severe underutilization of the asset. So we need to figure out how to utilize the asset more, and therefore that would be a great way to gain more income from non-fans. Right? I think our fans support a lot already. So the last thing I want to do is get more money from them. I want to get money from elsewhere, and I think that's what we're trying to do. The other one is to make the club more sustainable by selling players. I think QPR has always been successful in selling players before, and I think we have to get back to that in a big way. And that's why the first thing we did was part of the new structure was to put in a new training ground. So So we bought that site about 3 years ago, and the first phase of development is already done. And so the first team is actually moved in there, and I think by next summer, the new building will be up as well, not just the pitches. And I think the whole academy and first team will be together in one site finally together. And I think once that, so that's phase two, and phase three will be developing the other parts of the academy as well. So the key thing for us is making sure that the pipeline of players that we have to first play for the club, and hopefully then we can sell on to other clubs as well, is also there, because I think that's a very crucial part of our growth and our plans going forward, right? So that's another key part to sustainability as well, making sure that we have a pipeline of players that are coming through, and that's why the focus on training.
Perfect. And then transitioning into LAFC, what's the what are some of the key differences you found in managing a UK-based club to a US-based club?
I think the revenues are vastly different between both. The income streams for LAFC are much higher than QPR, although LAFC is only 5 years old. The amount of money the fans spend in the MLS is a lot higher than the amount of money the fans spend in the UK. I think people there see more entertainment than they do in the UK. I think a lot of fans in the UK come for 3 points. I think a lot of fans in the US go for a good time. Of course, everybody wants their team to win, but I think they go there and they want to enjoy themselves, and they understand that going there and enjoying themselves also helps their club. So it's a very, very more community aspect of that perspective there, where they go and have a good time too. So I think that's the biggest difference of all. Of course, both leagues are structured very, very differently too. I mean, in terms of players you're allowed, and what kind of structure of players you're allowed to bring in, and how even some of the players are paid. I think from the MLS have got a completely different structure to European football in general. And I think the great thing about the MLS is that it keeps on growing every year. It's on getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I think it's going to be really, really big one day, in my opinion. And as more teams are coming along, which is great, I think there's a lot more interest coming along there as well. I think it's also challenging the other sports over there as well. In terms of viewership, I think there's a lot more interest, and I think the women's game is helping a lot too. And because they're going to have a World Cup there in 2026, I think after that it's obviously going to probably grow even more. So and LA is a great market. Where even though we have 2 teams there, the market's still big enough to have both teams, and I think we're very lucky that we have a great fan base over there, which again developed over the last 7-8 years only, but amazing fan base there, and I think those fans are the way they cheer the team on is unbelievable. I think it's very, very rare you see that globally. I think that we have something called the 3-2-5-2, and it's like a black and gold wall where they just sing for like half an hour before the game starts to like half an hour after the game ends, and they don't stop at all. And so I've been there so many times, and sometimes I'm spending more time looking at them than actually watching the game, because those fans are just nuts, and it's great to watch. So
So if I'm right in saying you were one of the founders of the club, so how did you go about getting all the other owners? 'Cause there are something like 21 owners. Right?
So it started off with just 3 of us, myself, Henry Wynn, and Vincent Tan, the owner of Cardiff. The 3 of us went there to try and get a license, and then we brought in Peter Goober because we wanted to do LA, and he's based in LA, and so we got in Peter Goober. So there's 4 of us, and then the 4 of us went to look for more partners after that. So it started with just 4 of us, and Tom Penn. Sorry, 5 of us. Tom Penn was actually the guy who put it all together to begin with, so the 5 of us put it together, and then from there we had to go look for other partners, because we wanted to have other partners, and we needed to have other partners, and so we brought them in. But we started off with just first 4, myself, Vincent, Tom, and Henry, and then we brought in Peter, so 5 of us. But at the beginning, I remember at least the first year or year and a half, was just the 5 of us meeting up together and trying to concoct something together. And half the time we were like, I wasn't sure this was going to happen. And when it did, I was, happy. I was so excited. But it was just unbelievable as well that we actually managed to get a franchise in LA, which is
especially to how well they're doing now.
Yeah. I mean, but
it's insane.
How well it's doing now is nice, but it's just LA is a city I love to go to all the time anyway. So have one in LA, I think, is what made it even more exciting for me. Because you don't want to have a club where you never visit. I think that's the part that this is no point, really.
Yeah. Perfect. So just going on to now, how do you spend your time nowadays? What's your routine like? How do you spend your time between Westports and QPR and your other companies?
I spend most of my time with Westports. These other companies, I'm now, although I'm not the major partner in LAFC. I've got partners there who run the club. I've got 3 partners there who've taken over running it, and they're actually doing a fantastic job. And as a result, I don't have to participate in much. Of course, at board level, I do, but they're running it so well that even at the board level, it's almost formalities most of the time. And of course, as you know, they're doing very, very well. We've qualified for the playoffs. I think we just won the league, and so it's a great season this year. And it's not the first great season. We've had a few good seasons so far. So my partners there are doing a fantastic job with how they run the club, and what you see is just on the field stuff. Off the field, they're running it very, very well as well. And then in QPR, we have a good management team in place, and I think that's the key part here. We have a good board now, which is myself, Tony, Amit, and Rich. I think we have a good board there. But beyond the board, we have a good management team in place, and I think that's what I talked about earlier about structure. I think the governance and the structure is crucial. If you don't have that, a lot of things can go wrong. Now, if you're a startup, it's fine. You can get away with it for the first 6 months or first 1 year. Yeah. But after that, you have to think about structure and governance eventually. And sometimes it's difficult to have that structure and governance in place because I've seen many times before as an incubator where the founder doesn't want to give up, and he doesn't want the governance and structure because putting in the board might tell him that, look, you're not the right guy to run the company. Right? You're a great shareholder and you will be the largest shareholder forever, but maybe somebody else will be better running the company. And that's what some people always find difficult to put in a structure because they don't want to have a structure because sometimes they know that, their deficiencies may be called out, a bit more. But as I said, you can get away with it for a while. As a startup, it's fine. But eventually, if you want to become a sizable company, you'll need to do so. And I think, whether you're doing it via, getting VCs, the VCs will put it in the structure. Good VCs will put it in the structure. Or whether you're doing it via just, driving your income. If you don't have a structure in place in the long term, someone will try to extract some money from you because they can. Right? So, and so that's why I always recommend that you have good governance and a good structure in place. And that's why I can focus all my time on Westport and not worry as much about this. Of course, every weekend, game time is still going to be a worry no matter what because it's still stressful. But at least I'm not worried for the rest of the weekend. And the team there, Lee Hoos and Lance Ferdinand are doing a fantastic job that I don't have to get involved in the day-to-day stuff, which is great.
And final question: What's next for you? What are your goals for the next few years?
For me, so family's always first, so a lot of the goals are there. But in general for Westport, we're trying to expand our footprint. We're trying to get a concession to double our capacity, and I think that's been our focus for the last year and a half. And I think we're going to continue focusing on that. And I think that's my main prime project. As far as sports is concerned, I'm still open, but we haven't really seen, and we have. I'm not been looking, but we have been evaluating other opportunities. But so far, nothing has really come along that strikes our fancy. So if something does, we might. But if it doesn't, it's okay as well. We're not really looking anyway.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for talking to me today. I think. Oh, sorry, the sound's got a bit muffly. Thank you so much for talking to me today. I've learned so much from about Westports to your incubator to a TV series, which I'll have to watch now. So thank you so much, Ruben. And
pleasure.
yeah, good luck with
Oh,
everything.
thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate that too. It's been great.